This is PropertyBT, a podcast of BT correspondents.
For many young Singaporeans, buying a built-to-order or BTO home from the Housing and Development Board or HDB is the first step in one's home ownership journey. In October's BTO exercise, HDB will offer about 8,500 flats across 15 projects under the new flat classification of Standard, Plus and Prime. Prime flats will be in the most choice locations, usually closer to the city centre. Plus flats will be in choicer locations, such as being near the MRT station or very good amenities. More options for buyers is great. But there's also a catch. Plus and Prime flats will come with higher subsidies, but also much tighter restrictions on resale, rental and occupancy. So what does this all mean for the BTO applicants? And how will this impact the HDB resale market in the future? Welcome to PropertyBT, a podcast series by the Business Times. I'm senior correspondent Leslie Yee, and I'll be your host as we gather insights on all things Singapore property to help you in your property investment journey. The new system sounds complicated? Don't worry, I've Dr. Lee Jia, Head of Real Estate Intelligence, Digital and Software Solutions, PropertyGuru Group, to help us understand the new HDB Standard, Plus and Prime model. Welcome, Dr. Lee.
Hi, Leslie. It's a pleasure to be here.
A major point to note for Plus and Prime flats are the resale restrictions. A buyer of a BTO Plus or Prime flat faces clawback of resale proceeds upon selling the unit. Also, the sale of Plus or Prime resale flats is restricted to a smaller pool of buyers, such as local families who meet the monthly household income ceiling of 14,000 Singapore dollars that applies to buyers of BTO homes. Surely, all this depresses the financial returns from buying a BTO Plus or Prime flat. Dr. Lee, will the clawback on resale proceeds and a restricted buyer pool for resale units severely limit the financial gains from buying a BTO Plus or Prime home?
So, if we look at some of the research that we have done in PropertyGuru, we often see that people tend to choose HDB flats in the central areas or in places that are very close to MRT station. Now, with all this restriction, especially for the new homes, it definitely will have some impact on the potential financial gains in the immediate term. But that being said, over time, more and more households place a greater emphasis on proximity, on accessibility. So even though the returns may be impacted in the short and immediate term, in the longer run, those that sell their flats will still get a considerable return.
Dr. Lee, we talked about the attractive locations of the Plus and Prime units. I suppose the biggest complaint many BTO applicants will have with such homes is the minimum occupation period or MOP of 10 years versus the 5 years MOP of standard BTO flats. MOP is calculated from the date one collects the keys to one's flat and refers to the time that one has to physically occupy the home before being able to sell it in the open market. Another thing is renting out an entire Plus or Prime flat is not allowed. Thus, I suppose you cannot just sit back, relax and earn recurring rental income from renting out your home, right? So Dr. Lee, how restrictive are the 10-year MOP and the tight flat rental restriction rules that apply to Plus and Prime BTO buyers?
Now, I think when we think about the restrictiveness of the 10-year period and the rental rules, right, we can see that the clear motivation is to help households to stay in their HDB flats for a longer period of time. So actually, according to a consumer sentiment study that we did recently, more than half of the HDB owners had no intention of selling their HDB flat after MOP. And this is actually very consistent across many years when we see that actually many households stay in their HDB flat for more than 10 years. In the longer term, definitely to some of the households, that actually thinking of upgrading or they may have some demographic shocks, it may be very restrictive to them. But I think in the longer term, in the bigger picture, it works better for the whole community.
Interesting. I guess being stuck to staying in a home for at least 10 years and not being able to sell the home does sound very onerous, right? I mean, over 10 years, housing needs may change based on family size, family needs, or financial circumstances. Dr. Lee, just now you mentioned that a survey showed that many people do stay on in their flats for more than 10 years, right? But let's think about it. I guess these new BTO flats will largely be targeting a lot of young home buyers. In your view, do you think young home buyers will happily stay in a home for 10 years or more?
Now, that is actually a very interesting question. So what happens is, at the base, right, we often associate owning a HDB flat to natural upgrading, moving up the housing ladder. But truth to be told, a lot of the families, especially those with young children, they would like to stay there because their children will have to progress to the primary school, and that's why we see that usually they will stay more than 5 years or even more than 10 years. That being said, upgrading, moving to a condominium is a kind of Singapore dream that a lot of young Singaporeans may have. And they still have other options for them. They can buy a resale flat, they can buy a BTO, but not in the plus or prime location. So there's still options for them.
I think a very exciting aspect of public housing today is that the HDB is building many new homes in very prime locations, right? I mean, think of areas such as Greater Southern Waterfront, the Old Turf City in Bukit Timah, Mount Pleasant, Tanjong Rhu, Bayshore, as well as popular existing HDB towns. However, in life, there are always trade-offs. New BTO homes in choice locations will come with the tighter restrictions we have talked about. Also, BTO prices for plus and prime homes may be higher than for standard units. So, weighing all this together, Dr. Lee, can you hazard a guess? Will plus and prime flats be popular with BTO applicants?
That is actually a very interesting question. When we look at the resale markets, we'll often find that people are very interested in these prime locations. But at the same time, they are also bounded by affordability concerns. So some of the areas that saw a lot of activity are, say, in Woodlands because of the price range. So if we go back to all the application rates, right, I would say the one that is often very popular, even in some less well-known, less central areas, are those 5-room HDB flats. Space become kind of a premium, I feel. Then the next is, of course, the 4-room HDB flats. An interesting observation is that the applicants are not so sticky than before. They are not particular like, we don't choose Tengah because it's much further to the west and not close to the central. They look at what is its proximity like to MRT station. So the MRT station here plays a very, very critical role. So if we take a few steps back, if given all things equal, both the central and the standards are not that close to MRT station, they have similar typologies, you may see that because of the new restrictions, the applications probably may be similar. In fact, sometimes we may see the standard being higher because people want to have that flexibility, and we can't discount that flexibility value.
Interesting, Dr. Lee. I guess applicants may be quite granular in really looking at the specifics of each particular project before applying and be fairly neutral in terms of actually the locations that they're open to. Still to come, is the condo upgrading dream intact for BTO Plus and Prime flat buyers?
If you've been a fan of the podcast Mark to Market, Wealth BT and PropertyBT, they are moving to a new listing, BT Correspondence. Look for episodes every Tuesday from October. All the insights and analysis and market trends, property, wealth, and soon mobility too. Powered by the Business Times journalism of Genevieve Kwa, Leslie Yee, Ben Paul, and Darren Wong. Because great reads should be heard. The BT Correspondence channel. Find BT Correspondence wherever you listen to podcasts.
And now, back to PropertyBT, a podcast of BT Correspondence.
Welcome back to PropertyBT. If you buy a BTO Plus or Prime home, you have to wait much longer before you can sell the home and upgrade to a condo. Consider a typical couple who applies for a BTO home at around 30 years old and collects the keys to their BTO Plus or Prime home in their mid-30s. Such a couple can only sell the home and buy a condo when they're in the mid to late 40s. Dr. Lee, will it be hard for a buyer of a BTO Plus or Prime unit to upgrade to private housing?
This question, I think there's quite a number of layers. So when we think about upgradability, there are two indicators. The first is the prevailing resale price. The second is, of course, the prices of the private housing. The truth is, actually, a lot boils down to the timing. We have seen certain timing where people purchase their BTO flat during economic crisis or when prices are relatively at the trough, and they could actually significantly upgrade to a condominium. At the same time, those who bought at a much higher point, they may have greater difficulties. So the time of wait, sometimes it benefits the owner who stay longer. So I think that the issue here is probably the loss of that flexibility, the loss of that option. And that option to move or not to move is a valuable option.
We do live longer nowadays, so maybe waiting longer to upgrade to a condo will not be problematic. After all, one waits this out while living in a choice HDB home, right? Also, many professionals, executives and so on could be in their peak earning years and have built up substantial savings when they're in the mid to late 40s. In short, some people could be in a great position to upgrade to a condo at such an age. Still, the scope to borrow to fund a housing purchase can get more limited as one gets older. Dr. Lee, after weighing all these points and so on, and you mentioned the flexibility of the shorter MOP, right? Should a buyer who wants to upgrade from BTO to condo buy a standard flat instead of a plus or prime unit?
Of course, if the household its aim is to first get a HDB flat and eventually move up the housing ladder to fulfill their housing aspiration, I would say that a standard flat gives them that additional 5-year flexibility. The part that is a bit more challenging, a lot of people will say, hey, but I can get a prime flat or a prime location. The returns are higher, but the price they pay are usually also higher. So in a standard flat, actually in terms of the return one can get, is actually pretty significant. It's just that in percentage terms it's significant, but in terms of absolute terms, you may still get higher for those in the prime location because of the higher investment capital outlay. That being said, for those upgraders, really the flexibility is what it matters.
So I suppose maybe a smart home buyer who wants to upgrade may try to go for a standard unit, but possibly a good standard unit. Well, some larger resale HDB flats, of course, in sought-after locations have sold for strong prices of close to $1 million Singapore dollars or over $1 million Singapore dollars each. Dr. Lee, I wonder, could a reason for the strength of prices of choice HDB resale flats be because some buyers are making a beeline for such homes post the unveiling of the new Standard Plus and Prime model for BTO homes?
I think we have to go back to the driving forces of why there's $1 million flats. Generally, income is rising. Second, a lot of households value space. And in the private condominium, some of these spaces are very expensive. The larger room types are very expensive. And the prime HDB flats actually offer greater value. And that was probably one of the driving reasons for these $1 million flats. And because of that, definitely when people are applying for HDB flats in the prime areas, in a choice location, they will see that it makes more sense to go for more choice because of the investment gain. But I tend to believe that when it comes to choice of homes, there are many, many parameters that one has to deal with, like schools, childcare, proximity to parents, and all this weigh on the household's choice of where they want to locate in.
I suppose quite some way down the road, we will have newer resale plus and prime flats in choice locations that come with tighter restrictions, competing with much older resale flats in choice locations with much lighter restrictions. So Dr. Lee, are resale HDB flats in choice locations which are not classified as plus or prime better buys than resale plus and prime units?
Yeah. Now, buyers looking at these two types of flats will have a very difficult decision to make. Because while the prime and plus, right, they have that restrictions, the clawback. The older HDB flats have a shorter lease. So which one actually pans out better? Now, definitely for some of the newer choice location flats that are not subject to the restrictions, they will definitely be popular because, again, the flexibility. But at the same time, these flats may be priced at a much higher rate than, say, those Prime and Plus. So again, there's quite a fair bit of trade-offs here. And I think from a property seeker, they need to know what trade-off is the most important here.
So I guess be smart and understand the trade-offs. The new classification of HDB flats as Standard, Plus and Prime is obviously a major policy change. This new framework aims to keep flats affordable to all income groups, maintain a good social mix in every town and region, and keep the system fair for all. The size of windfall gains from buying a BTO home in a popular location will be curtailed. Meanwhile, with the higher subsidies and also housing grants, those with relatively lower incomes can also buy Plus or Prime BTO homes. Dr. Lee, do you like this new framework? And will it promote fairness among various BTO home buyers?
I would say that I am a supporter of this framework. Now, if you think about the underlying planning parameters when HDB comes to think about Plus and Prime, I think they are trying to provide a very diverse housing options to every different segment. I think the key part here is how do we control the market in such a way where it's not totally out of touch for some of the lower income or those who may not be so well off. Because we do not want HDB flats to be totally inaccessible, especially in the Prime and Plus areas. So I feel that there's greater fairness in a way, ensuring that future generations still can have a potential to owning a HDB flat in the prime locations. So I'm really a supporter of this Plus and Prime framework. Definitely some people will feel aggrieved because there's less of the return, the loss of the option, the 10 years wait is onerous, as you mentioned. But I think in a broader scheme of things, a lot of things will even out. And I think even for those buyers, right, or property seekers, there are still options there for them to choose.
Dr. Lee, very well said. So you do support the new flat classification and how it will go about and help in building a community. Buying a home is a major decision for couples who are buying their first home. Do discuss this issue calmly and thoroughly. Do also do your sums. If you're eligible to buy a BTO home, carefully weigh the pros and cons of Standard versus Plus versus Prime homes. Importantly, good luck in your application. Thank you to my guest, Dr. Lee Naijia of PropertyGuru.
Thank you, Leslie.
That's it for PropertyBT this time. Join us next time where we dive into Singapore's private home rental market. Has bargaining power in the leasing market shifted from landlords to tenants? What are tenants looking for? Where are the sweet spots in the residential leasing market? What are yields like for owners? And is it attractive to be a private residential landlord? I'm Leslie Yee. Thank you for listening and happy property hunting.
This is a podcast by the Business Times. Find more BT podcasts at businesstimes.com.sg/podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is meant to provide general information only. SPH Media accepts no liability for loss arising from any reliance on the podcast or use of third parties' products and services. Please consult professional advisors for independent advice.